Today I want to talk about an untapped Orca strategy that will quite literally make millionaires this bull run, including myself. This is providing liquidity for super blue chip assets in correlated pairs on the Orca decentralized exchange. It's literally a pretty simple process. Now, fair disclaimer, you are not going to become a millionaire off of a $10 investment. You're not going to become a millionaire off a $1,000 investment. You need to have capital in order for this to work. But the goal here is to find correlated assets with SOL. So that's stuff like HNT that has high utility on the network that you can pair with SOL. That's also going to be tokens like Parcel that you can go and pair with SOL. Now, keep in mind, I'm not necessarily advocating for these tokens. I'm just saying finding assets that actually have a use case, that are tied to a platform that actually have revenue, that have a real business model behind them, and then pair them with SOL. Go with tighter ranges, earn income. As you can see, this income is displaying at roughly 63% APR right now. Up here, this income is displaying at roughly 95% APR. I personally know people in my DeFi legacy program that are doing well over 150% APR with their range on this position. The point is, we want to find high utility assets that we can pair with SOL. And once we do that, not only are we going to witness the appreciation from both Parcel token or whatever token we choose and SOL going up in price, we're also going to witness all the fees or rewards that we would collect. As you can see, there's a 95% APR right here. All of that is from trading fees. Now, a lot of you guys might be saying to yourself, well, this is most definitely a tapped market, and I'm just going to tell it to you straight, it is most definitely not a tapped market right now, at least on Orca. There's currently $6 billion in TVL over on the Solana network. PayPal just put a bunch of capital into PYUSD over on the Solana network. There's currently $3.5 billion of stablecoins over on the Solana network. Keep in mind that's separate from this $6 billion right here, and they're trading roughly $2.5 billion per day. For reference, Ethereum trades roughly $1.5 billion per day with a TVL of $48 billion. You guys can do the math there on the ratio. That ratio is a lot better, a lot more active. Now, that's not to say that Ethereum does not have its use cases. It most definitely does. It is very, very, very secure, and it has been a proven model, but again, it can't necessarily handle a bunch of transactions and a bunch of active users like Solana can. But when we look at Orca compared to everything I just mentioned, $6 billion in TV on the Solana network, Orca only makes up for 293 million of that. And if we scroll down to some of the other protocols, Radium makes up for about $1.6 billion basically. But Radium right now is a bunch of meme coins primarily, and it's also full range liquidity pools. It is not concentrated liquidity pools. So I want to dive into Metrics Finance. I want to go over to the Discover page, and I want to show you exactly how you can find these untapped Orca liquidity pools. Basically, the first thing that I like to do is go into the must include section and type SOL. Now, in order to do this exercise, you guys will need Metrics Pro. You guys can strictly just go to the Metrics website, purchase Pro for $40 a month, or we did just release a brand new bundle that allows you to supercharge your DeFi returns, and it brings our elite software to an expert community, which means that you'll get Metrics Pro, which is typically $480 per year. You'll get DeFi Excel, which is a community at Builder Wealth. That's typically $360 per year. And we also provide a one-on-one onboarding session, so that way you know exactly what to do once you get access to Metrics Pro, and an exclusive DeFi Elite starter guide. All of that is available for just $500 per year, and that is your locked in price. Now, keep in mind, we started this offer at $400 per year because every 10 members that purchase this, we up the price. Anyways, that information will be down below in the description. If you guys really want to get access to the best DeFi software in the game, as well as the best DeFi community in the game, then DeFi Elite Suite is for you. And if you guys are just trying it out, go try out the free trial, 5 days for free over on the Metrics Finance website. But over here, remember, we want to look at APR as well. We want to look at APRs higher than 25% to start off with. We might adjust this later on, but I typically start at 25%. The reason why is because even though this is showing 30% APR, this assumes that we have a range of plus 25% from the current price, minus 25% from the current price. I know that I'm personally going to go with a tighter range than that. And if I know that I'm going to go with a tighter range than that, then I know that, hey, if I'm looking at 25%, that could end up being 35, or that could end up being 50% when I go in with the tighter range. Now, next thing I'm going to do is put my TVL higher than $250,000. This is a good rule of thumb for starting out with. Sometimes I go lower, but it really depends on the specific position because I don't want to end up being exit liquidity. So maybe if there's something like Sold USDC that has, let's just say $150,000 and I deploy into it, that's fine. Whereas if it's some brand new asset that, doesn't really have a lot of liquidity elsewhere, then I'm not going to want to deploy into it, in my personal opinion. Volume to TVL ratio, we're going to look at higher than 50%. That's going to bring us to 22 different pools. What does this do? This shows us the trending pools on Orca, on the Solana network, that are doing a decent return and have a decent amount of liquidity. Now, we can sort by highest APR. We're most likely going to find some meme coins at the top. But once we scroll down to, let's just say, page 2, we're going to start to find some actual assets that we care about. Stuff like Orca to SOL, stuff like Render to SOL. I'm favoriting these assets as we go down. If we go over to the third page, we also see Pith to SOL. Now, I'm personally thinking that we need to adjust this TVL metric maybe to something like $200,000 because we did only only see 22 different pools. Now we see 23 different pools. Next thing I'm going to do is adjust this volume to TVL ratio to something like 30%, which is going to put us at 31 different pools, and we can just browse through those different opportunities again. And the reason why is because we did only find a couple pools over here, and I don't want to be limited to a couple pools, especially if they're not doing that good of a return, I should say. Page 1 was literally all meme coins, so I'm going to skip past that. There's this shadow token over here, which I've heard of before. And guys, by the way, just a quick little tip. If you look at some of these tokens and you look at their logos, typically the meme coins are going to have meme-like logos, little cartoons, stuff like that. Whereas more realistic assets, they're going to have like, you know, actual logos that kind of portray their brand, I guess you could say. So branding is everything. Branding is key. I also see Jito sold to Camino. This is one that we can include on the list. We see Jito sold to W. We're finding a lot more positions. So I think our second run on this Discover was definitely way better. Now that being said, we have a bunch of different positions here. So I'm going to see if I can narrow things down. Off the bat, I see that this HNT to Sol one right over here is showcasing a 266% APR. It does have 195K in TVL, but it's a much greater APR than 43%. We're going to take off the 43% one right there. I also see that I have W Sol and Jito Sol to W. Now, these are basically the same thing, except Jito Sol is a derivative of staked Sol, basically. So we're just going to unbookmark the Jito Sol to W one because that one's doing a much lower return. And then from here, we can start to build out our portfolio. First things first, let's take a look at HNT to Sol. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into this first one, and then we're going to go a little bit quicker on the next one, guys. And remember, if you guys get stuck, if you guys need help, the best place to get your support and your questions answered is in the DeFi Excel community that you can join for 30 bucks a month if you really want to. Now, that being said, the first thing I look at when I open up these pairs is the correlation. This is about a 25% correlation. So as far as correlations go, 0% means that there's zero correlation. 100% means that they are going up and down the same exact amount. And then of course, negative is going to be, well, when one goes up a specific amount, the other one goes down a specific amount. When we zoom out and we look at 90 days, you'll notice that there's this period where HNT just did very well compared to Sol, which is causing this correlation to be way off, basically. When we zoom out and we look at the past 90 days, you'll notice that there's this period where, let's just say HNT was doing very well compared to Sol because it was taking less HNT to equal 1 Sol. And then over here in this period, Sol's doing a lot better. So when we create our range, we're going to want to factor that in. So if we were to put our max price at something like 32 and we were to keep our min price over here at like, let's just say 20.5, that's going to get us about a 285% APR. Not bad. It's going to get us about 50% of each asset. Still not bad whatsoever. And if we wanted to deploy, let's just say $10,000 in here, we're going to do about 72 bucks per day. So we can scale it up. That's one thing that I always make sure we can do. Scale it up. Yes, the APR does drop from 285 to 262. That's because we're deploying 10K and there's already $200,000 of TVL in here. It's diluting the pool a little bit. So I'm going to save this to my portfolio and then I'm going to move on into the next one. I want to look at W to Sol next. Now, ideally, we would be doing some due diligence on these tokens, looking at CoinGecko, looking at their business model, all that stuff, but we don't have time for that in today's YouTube video. On here, I'm going to put a $10,000 deposit amount. Once again, I'm going to look at how many W tokens equal 1 Sol, which means this period, W was doing better than Sol. Now Sol's starting to run compared to W, basically. This has a 40% correlation. So again, there could be a decent amount of divergence loss in here, just something that we have to keep in mind. I'm going to put a top price of 675 and I'm going to put a bottom price of roughly, let's just say 400. That will get us to about 50-50. Why do I want 50-50 in this pool? Well, that would be a good question to ask. The reason why is because over here, W did very well compared to Sol. But then recently it's starting to creep. It's not starting to run like crazy, like Sol's just completely crushing W. It's starting to creep, right? Sol's starting to do slightly better than W, which means that there could be a turnaround because W still had so much momentum over here. But one thing I do notice about this pool, this volume has declined, which means when we're looking at this APR, it's showing 146%, but we're factoring in all this volume when realistically we're doing this volume. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a 7-day calculation range. That's only going to use the past 7 days, which seem to be pretty consistent. And that right there is a 35% APR. This one, I'm just going to go ahead and unfavorite and scratch off the list because that's not something that I personally want to deploy into. There's also this Pyth to Sol, Pyth to Sol, however you want to call it. I'm not going to look at this quite yet because that's one of the lower performing ones. I want to make sure I have some solid assets producing me a good income. And then I want to start to diversify into some of the larger assets that have a ton of utility that might not be doing a good return, but most definitely are good to have in the portfolio for growth exposure. So in Jito Sol to Camino, I'm going to put my deposit amount at $10,000. This correlation is 50%, very correlated when we look at the past 30 days. We zoom out to the past 90 days. Obviously, there's not as much of a correlation because Camino was recently launched. And if we look at this 30-day chart again, as far as plotting my range, I am going to do a range of 2,500 on the top, and then I'm going to put this bottom price at at roughly 1400. So 1400 to 2500, that's showcasing roughly a 120% APR. This volume seems pretty consistent, so we're not going to adjust anything there. We're going to save it to the portfolio. The goal here is to do well over 100% APR, hopefully at least 10% per month on this portfolio. Then we could take that income, compound it back in these positions, and then we can make ourselves millionaires when these positions see a ton of price appreciation. Now this next one is sold to shadow token. Once again, let's put a $10,000 deposit amount right here, and keep in mind you don't have to deploy $10,000. It's completely up to you what you want to deploy. I'm just putting $10,000 as an example. This one has an 18% correlation, so not nearly as good. We are going to have to go with a broader range for this one because it's barely correlated and we don't want to get wrecked by divergence loss. But if we just did something like 350 to 605, that would get us about 58% shadow. Obviously we'd want to make sure we're more bullish on shadow if we're going to take on that exposure. But with that being said, volume seems consistent, liquidity distribution looks good. We're doing about $45 a day off that, which is 164% APR. So let's save it to the portfolio. Now we have SolPyth, and the reason why this is doing a substantially lower APR is because these ones have a 93% correlation. But with that being said, if we go with a tighter range, something like 485 as our max price, and then we bring up that min price to something over here like 395, that's essentially going to get us roughly a 60% APR right there off $15,000. That's pretty solid. Volume's pretty consistent. So I'm going to save that to my portfolio. And the reason why is because it's good to have those solid correlated pairs in your portfolio to kind of be a backbone. Taking a look over at Solana Orca, once again, this one has a 60% correlation, a little bit higher than the others. We can go with a little bit tighter of a range, but we don't want to go too tight on this one. We're going to do 59 to 86. That's going to get us about a 105% APR. If we pay attention to volume history, probably want to zoom into the past 7 days because that seems a little bit more consistent, and that's showing a 67% APR. Pretty big difference there. So it's important to pay attention to the volume and adjust your calculation range as needed. And of course, we have render to sold. Now this one has a correlation of 81%. So once again, very, very closely correlated. We can go over here to our max price and bring that to like 33.5, and we can bring that min price to something like 24.2. And basically this is going to get us roughly an 85% APR. This is pretty consistent, so let's keep that in mind and just save that to the portfolio. And you're probably wondering what it's doing when I'm saving to the portfolio. It's putting it into this build section over here. So from there, build basically aggregates all the different positions. So we went through at about $75,000, and that's doing about 9.5% per month. Now obviously we can optimize this if we really want to, allocate a little bit less to some of these like more blue chip, more correlated pairs, and allocate a little bit more over here. But I personally think this is good because that's $236 per day that we can take and increase our position in number one, just Sol token, but number two, in something like Pyth or something like Orca and Render. And the best part is we have exposure to these assets. So when these assets do well in the bull market, now keep in mind that's a big if they do well in the bull market, then of course we'll witness all of that in our liquidity pools as well, and also have the estimated fees. Now there is divergence loss, which is basically opportunity cost, and that's something for another day. And if you guys do want a video on that, drop a like, subscribe, notifications turned on. And again, if you're looking to dive deeper into the DeFi ecosystem, I highly recommend you check out the DeFi Elite Suite. It's your go-to starter guide. It's bundled with Metrics Pro as well as the DeFi Excel community. And guys, once you're on the website, if you guys just want to check out one of them individually, that is completely fine as well, because it's only $40 a month for Metrics Pro and $30 a month for DeFi Excel. Just hit learn more and it'll tell you more about what that actually is. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.